The first time I saw the letter, I thought it was a joke. A crisp white envelope, the HOA's embossed logo staring at me like a warning. I opened it at my kitchen counter, coffee in one hand, expecting another nonsense rule about lawn height or mailbox colors. Instead, my eyes locked onto the words that made my stomach drop. Dear Mr. Carter, as part of our community expansion efforts, we are incorporating your land into the shared green space available to all residents. I stopped reading. My land? The 200 acres my grandfather bled for, the same land my father fought to keep when banks refused a loan to black farmers? They were calling it community land? A slow burn started in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe. Maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe someone in the HOA, mostly old money retirees who liked to sip Chardonnay and pretend this was some exclusive golf club, had gotten ahead of themselves. I'd moved to Coldwater Creek 5 years ago, making history as the first black rancher in this quiet Texas town. Bought the land outright, no loans, no handouts. Built my ranch from the ground up, raising cattle and keeping to myself. The HOA had never liked that. They controlled every inch of this place, except for my ranch, the only property not under their jurisdiction. Until now. I stepped onto my front porch, letting the warm morning air roll over me, but the usual peace felt off. My land stretched before me, golden fields swaying under the sun, the wooden fences I'd built with my own hands standing strong. But something felt wrong. A pickup truck rolled by, slowing just enough for me to notice. Mr. Langston, HOA president. White, retired oil exec, face always tight like he smelled something foul. He smirked from behind his tinted window before speeding off. A chill crawled up my spine. I wasn't imagining this. Something was coming. By the end of the week, my land didn't feel like mine anymore. It started small. A group of kids cutting across my property, riding bikes through my pastures, spooking my cattle. I let it slide. They didn't know better. Then, a couple walking their golden retriever along my fence line. I stepped onto my porch, arms crossed. The woman waved like we were old friends. Oh, we just love this trail. She chirped. This ain't a trail, I said flatly. She blinked, then gave a little laugh like I was the crazy one. Well, the HOA newsletter said this is part of the new green space. We just moved in last month, such a lovely community. I didn't answer, just stared until she tugged her husband's sleeve, whispering something as they turned back. That night, I pulled out the letter again, reading every word. Shared green space. Open to all residents. Compliance expected. Compliance. A bitter taste settled in my mouth. They were treating this like a done deal. Not a proposal. Not a request. An order. Still, I needed to be sure. I drove into town the next morning, straight to the county clerk's office. Mrs. Ruiz, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, greeted me with a knowing look. Figured you'd be in soon. My stomach tightened. You heard, she sighed, sliding a file across the counter. Langston's been working on this for months. The HOA applied to rezone your land under a community development initiative. They pitched it as a donation. I exhaled sharply. A donation? Who the hell said I was donating anything?
No one.
They claimed it was understood. A slow, burning rage curled in my gut. Understood. Like I should have known my land wasn't really mine. Like it was just on loan until they decided to take it back. I flipped through the file. Meetings I hadn't attended. Votes I hadn't been informed of. My name wasn't on a single document, yet the HOA had approved the reclassification. The only thing left was finalizing the deed transfer. I gritted my teeth. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight. A shadow passed over the counter. I turned to see him. Langston. His suit was crisp despite the Texas heat, his expression polished with a kind of smugness only men like him could afford. Well, if it isn't our esteemed neighbor, he drawled, adjusting his Rolex. Hope there's no confusion, Carter. This is all for the community, you understand. I forced my voice to stay calm. I understand you're trying to steal my land. Langston chuckled, shaking his head.
Now.
No need for hostility. This is just how things work around here. I suggest you cooperate. Save yourself some trouble. My fists clenched, but I kept my voice even. We'll see about that. As I walked out, I felt Langston's eyes on my back. And I knew this was just the beginning. I spent the weekend reinforcing my fences. Real fences. Not just the old wooden posts that marked my property line, but heavy-duty steel wire with fresh, private property signs nailed every 20 feet. By Sunday morning, one of the signs had already been torn down. By Sunday evening, a gate had been installed at the end of my private road. An HOA gate. I killed my truck's engine and stared at the metal bars blocking my own damn driveway. A sleek new sign read, Coldwater Creek Community Park. Access for residents only. My blood turned to fire. I stepped out, boots crunching against gravel, and shoved at the gate. Locked. A brand new keypad flashed red at me. A car pulled up behind me, Langston's black Cadillac. The driver's window slid down, and his smirk greeted me like an old enemy. Oh, Carter. Didn't you get the memo? This entrance is for community members only. I walked up to his window, voice low. This is my land, Langston. He corrected smoothly. You missed the meeting. The vote passed unanimously. Your property is now a shared recreational space. I could barely breathe through the rage choking me. You don't have the legal right. The deed transfer is already in motion, he interrupted. A simple rezoning. You'll be compensated, of course. Compensated? My voice turned sharp. You mean the pennies you're offering me for 200 acres of generational land? Langston sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. You have to understand, Carter. This isn't personal. It's just business. The community has expectations. And, honestly, he chuckled, shaking his head. This town was never really meant for your kind of enterprise anyway. There it was. He might as well have said it outright. This town wasn't meant for black ranchers. This land was never supposed to be in my hands. I exhaled slowly, forcing my rage into something sharper. Determination. Take the gate down, I said coldly. Or I'll take it down myself. Langston's smirk widened. Do that, and I'll have you arrested for destruction of community property. I held his gaze, my hands itching to rip him out of that car. Instead, I turned, climbed back into my truck, and pulled out my phone. It was time to fight back. Building the case. First stop, Sheriff's office. Sheriff Maddox, a grizzled man who'd been in town longer than most of the HOA board, leaned back in his chair as I laid the documents on his desk. They can't do this, I said, my voice tight. The land is still legally mine. They don't have the deed. This is straight-up land theft. Maddox sighed, rubbing his temples. Legally? You're right. But they've greased the right palms, Carter. There are zoning petitions already halfway through the approval process. You think these judges and officials aren't in their pocket? I clenched my jaw. So that's it? They just get away with it? Maddox met my eyes, something unreadable in his expression. Not if you can make enough noise. But you're gonna need proof. And witnesses. I knew exactly where to get both. The inside man. Monday morning, I knocked on the door of an HOA board member, James Holloway. White, mid-50s, and just uncomfortable enough with the way things were being run. He opened the door with a wary glance. Carter, this isn't a good time. I know you didn't vote for this. I cut in. I know Langston forced it through. And I know they threatened you, too. His shoulders stiffened. I can't. They're breaking the law, Holloway. You help me, and when this blows up, you won't be the one in the line of fire. A long pause. Then he exhaled sharply. Meet me tonight. I have something you need to see. The breaking point. That night, Holloway slid a USB drive across the table at the local diner. Security footage, he muttered. HOA office. You'll want to skip to last week's meeting. I plugged it into my laptop, right there. Langston's voice filled the diner, smooth and arrogant. Once we finalize the transfer, Carter won't have a legal leg to stand on. He'll either take the settlement or we'll let the county seize it for unpaid fines. Either way, the land becomes ours. A woman's voice, one of the board members. And if he resists? Langston chuckled. Then we make things difficult. I snapped the laptop shut, my pulse roaring in my ears. They weren't just trying to steal my land. They were planning to break me. I looked up at Holloway. We're taking them down. His nod was small but firm. What's the plan? I grinned for the first time in days. First, I put up some fences. By sunrise, my land looked like a war zone. 12-foot electrified fences surrounded the pastures, humming with a low, steady warning. Freshly posted "No Trespassing" signs gleamed under the morning sun, with a line of security cameras mounted on the fence posts, blinking like watchful eyes. The final touch? A massive iron gate at the entrance, keypad protected and locked down tight. Let's see them try to call this community land now. I didn't have to wait long. By noon, a convoy of luxury SUVs rolled up like they were here for a damn parade. At the front, Langston's black Cadillac eased to a stop. The doors flew open. Langston stepped out, flanked by 3 HOA board members and a uniformed sheriff's deputy. He strolled toward my gate, adjusting his gold cufflinks like a man arriving to collect what was already his. I leaned against the fence, arms crossed, waiting. Langston gave me a smirk, so smug it made my fingers twitch. "Carter," he drawled. "I have to say, this little stunt? Not a good look." I didn't answer. Just let the silence stretch. He gestured to the towering fence. "What is this, a prison? You really think you can just lock out the community? That's not how this works." I glanced at the deputy, Sheriff Maddox himself. His expression was unreadable, but he wasn't stopping Langston. I gritted my teeth. "Corrupt bastard." Langston sighed, shaking his head in exaggerated disappointment. I tried to be civil. I really did. "But you've left us no choice. As of this morning, the county has officially condemned this fencing as a zoning violation. You have 24 hours to take it down, or—" I cut him off. "Or what?" His smirk widened. "Or we'll take it down for you, along with anything else that violates community standards." He turned to Maddox. "Sheriff, if you would?" Maddox pulled out a legal document and cleared his throat. "Under the authority of the Coldwater Creek Homeowners Association and county zoning laws, you are hereby ordered to remove all unauthorized barriers and comply with the Community Land Use Ordinance." I took the paper, skimmed it, then chuckled. They really thought they had me. Langston spread his arms. "This doesn't have to get messy, Carter. Sign the land transfer, take the payout, and move on. You're only making things worse for yourself." I met his gaze. Held it. Then I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and pressed play. Langston's own voice crackled through the speakers. "Once we finalize the transfer, Carter won't have a legal leg to stand on. He'll either take the settlement, or we'll let the county seize it for unpaid fines. Either way, the land becomes ours." The color drained from his face. Maddox's eyes flicked to me, then back to Langston. "What the hell is this?" I turned the volume up. "And if he resists?" one of the board members had asked in the recording. Langston's voice, cold and amused. "Then we make things difficult." The silence that followed was deafening. Langston's smirk faltered. His hands curled into fists, but he recovered fast. "That's fabricated. You think some spliced audio is going to—" I lifted my hand, and the news van rolled up. Langston stiffened as 2 reporters climbed out, cameras already rolling. "Mr. Carter," the lead reporter said, extending a mic, "we received an anonymous tip about an HOA illegally seizing land. Would you care to comment?" Langston's composure shattered. "You set me up," he hissed. I smiled. "I didn't set you up, Langston. You did that all on your own." He turned to Maddox, desperate. "Arrest him. Do something." But the sheriff wasn't moving. Because behind me, stepping through my front gate, was James Holloway, a known HOA board member. A witness. He cleared his throat, voice steady. "I can confirm the HOA board never received Carter's consent for the land transfer. And Langston," he turned to him coldly, "manipulated the process to push it through without legal grounds." Langston looked like a man drowning. "James. Save it." Holloway gestured to the reporter. I have documents proving everything Carter just said, including illegal rezoning approvals. The news crew ate it up. The cameras zoomed in. Langston was trapped. On record. On tape. With witnesses. I let the moment hang, watching him squirm. Then I leaned in, voice low. You wanted a fight? Well, here it is. His breathing turned ragged, his carefully constructed world crumbling right in front of him. And I wasn't done yet. Langston's face twisted, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. He wasn't used to this. Being challenged. Being exposed. His whole life, he'd moved through the world unchecked, his power absolute. But now? Right here, in front of rolling cameras and an audience that was finally seeing him for what he was, he looked small. He tried to recover. This is ridiculous, he scoffed, tugging at his collar like the heat was finally getting to him. A fabricated recording, some desperate accusations from a rancher who owns this land legally. I cut in, my voice sharp. And who never signed a damn thing. You are about to steal my property, Langston. And I have the proof. I lifted my phone again, scrolling to another file. The county records. See this? I turned the screen toward the reporters, enlarging the document. This is my deed. My name, my land, and nowhere does it say I signed over a single square inch to the HOA. The reporter zoomed in with her camera. The crowd of onlookers, neighbors, bystanders, even some HOA members who had come just to see me get bulldozed, leaned in. Langston took a step back. This is out of context. The community voted, Carter. Democracy. Democracy doesn't override property law, a new voice cut in. I turned. A woman in a gray suit stepped forward, flanked by two more men in official-looking attire. Langston froze. I smiled. Langston, I said slowly, watching his face drain of color, I don't believe you've met Audrey Castillo. Attorney. Civil rights investigator. Sent by the state to look into illegal land seizures. Langston sputtered. I got a call last night, Castillo continued, leveling him with a look that could shatter glass. From a concerned citizen. They provided enough evidence to warrant an immediate investigation. She turned to the reporters. And I'd be happy to go on record about how a wealthy HOA board attempted to defraud a black landowner of generational property under the guise of community expansion. The crowd murmured. The cameras zoomed in. Langston's hands shook. Now, hold on, he stammered. Let's not make this about. It's exactly about that. Castillo cut him off. Coldwater Creek has a long history of racially discriminatory property policies. And based on this recording, she gestured to my phone, I'd say we've found some modern-day evidence. Langston turned to Sheriff Maddox, desperate. Do something. Maddox, who had been conveniently silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. Now, Langston, do something, damn it. Arrest him. Arrest Carter. Langston's voice cracked, his control slipping. Maddox scratched his neck. Can't arrest a man for defending his own land. Langston's face darkened. He was losing. And he knew it. But he had one last move. He turned to the camera, straightened his posture, and smiled. A politician's smile. Calculated. This is all a big misunderstanding, he said smoothly, shifting gears in an instant. Look, I may have been overzealous in my efforts to improve the community. But I acted in good faith. Good faith. I scoffed. That recording says otherwise. Langston ignored me, focusing on the cameras like they were his last lifeline. I'd be happy to sit down with Mr. Carter, one-on-one, and reach the mutual agreement. This doesn't have to be contentious. We're all neighbors, after all. It might have worked, if not for the final nail in his coffin. A second news van pulled up. Langston frowned as a new cameraman jumped out. Who the hell? Then a woman stepped out. A black woman. Mid-60s. Sharp eyes. Steady hands clutching a thick manila folder. Langston's breath hitched. Mrs. Ruiz. The county clerk. The one person who could prove. You lying son of a bitch, she spat. The crowd gasped. She stormed up, shoving the folder into the hands of the lead reporter. This, she said, voice shaking with rage. Is every fraudulent zoning document this bastard pushed through unapproved? Illegal? He lied to the board, forged community support, and tried to erase a black family's legacy. Langston staggered back. The reporter flipped through the pages. Oh, this is big. Langston's face collapsed. I stepped closer, voice low. Still want to talk about mutual agreements? His eyes darted everywhere, searching for an escape. There wasn't one. Langston Davenport, Castillo said formally. You are under investigation for fraud, illegal rezoning, and racial discrimination in housing practices. You have the right to remain silent, but I highly suggest you call a lawyer. The crowd erupted. Langston snapped. This isn't over, he bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I stepped forward until there was barely an inch between us. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, I said, my voice steady. A man who thought he could take whatever he wanted. A man who's about to lose everything. His breathing was ragged, his face twisted in fury. And for the first time since this started, I saw fear in his eyes. Langston was still shouting when they led him away. Not in handcuffs, not yet. But surrounded, boxed in by reporters firing off questions, by neighbors whispering in hushed, scandalized voices. By the weight of his own downfall. This is a setup, he barked. You people are ruining my reputation. I built this community. I am this community. No one was listening. Sheriff Maddox, who had done everything in his power to look the other way, suddenly found himself cornered by the same news crew he had once ignored. Do you deny your department ignored multiple complaints about illegal land seizures? Maddox's lips pressed tight. He had no answers. Because there were none. And then there was Mrs. Ruiz, the county clerk who had just torched Langston's entire empire. She stood firm, arms crossed, watching as the man who had operated unchecked for years drowned in his own corruption. Justice, she murmured, is a long time coming, but it always comes. Langston paled. He must have known what was next. The lawsuits, the criminal investigations, the complete and total exposure. But none of that mattered to me, not right now. Right now, I was standing on my land. My family's land. And no one could take it. 3 weeks later, the fence still stood. So did the gate, the security cameras, and the newly reinforced property deed, one that now had a direct oversight clause from the state. No more loopholes. No more shady deals. Langston? His entire world collapsed. The HOA board voted him out. Unanimously. A lawsuit for fraudulent zoning violations was already in motion. His company's stock plummeted. His political ambitions? Dead on arrival. And Maddox? Forced into early retirement. Under investigation for colluding with the HOA. The Coldwater Creek neighborhood was changing. Slowly. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact with me now stopped to talk, offering apologies. Awkward but genuine. Some admitted they had looked the other way for too long. Some admitted they had never questioned the rules until now. I let them talk. Let them process it. But I didn't thank them for realizing too late what I had always known. Instead, I rebuilt. 1 month later, I walked the perimeter of the ranch, the golden light of sunset stretching over my land like an old, familiar embrace. It was quiet, peaceful, and it was mine. I reached the main gate and saw the new sign I had put up just yesterday. Carter Family Ranch, EST 1896. My grandfather's name. My great-grandfather's legacy. Still standing. I traced my fingers over the lettering, breathing in the scent of fresh wood and open fields. This land had always been ours. And now it always would be. 9.